on this July 20th, 1969.
That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, it's definitely showtime now.
This is Professor Tim Robinson, who is also a lieutenant with the Wicomico County Sheriff's Office. Professor Tim Robinson is a history buff and instructor at Salisbury University. How are you, sir?
Oh, I'm doing great. I'm pretty excited today being the 51st anniversary of the moon landing. It's an event that I've studied, read about, watched specials on, and really has been fascinated with since I was a little kid.
It is amazing what they managed to accomplish with the technology that they had then. Do you have any idea how long they prepared for it to try to make it happen?
Well, you've got to go all the way back to 1961, May of 1961, when Alan Shepard did his little short suborbital 15-minute up and back flight. And that alone, when John F. Kennedy comes up there, he says, look, we need to do something epic to catch up with the Soviets who are already ahead. And they said, what can we do? And his advisor said, no, we can get a man to the moon. And that's when he came out with his famous speech before the end of the decade to get a man on the moon. And they actually pulled this off. They went through the Project Mercury, Project Gemini. When Project Gemini was basically, the whole purpose of that was to practice all the tactics for doing docking, orbital maneuvering, spacewalks, everything they were going to need to do, long duration space flight. And that was the entire Gemini program was a test bed for what they're going to have to do for Apollo, as well as, they have to create the Saturn V rocket, and which they had the first successful launch of the Saturn V with Apollo 8 when they went to the moon. And think about how brave those astronauts were in December of 1968 to take off right before Christmas. They gave them a 50-50 chance of whether they would actually make it back. And
oh my goodness,
they never done anything like that before. It's the first launch of the Saturn V, first trip to the moon. They went around the moon. They did 10 orbits of the moon and came back.
We actually lost some astronauts on the launch pad.
Yeah, the Apollo 11 fire in 1967, January 1967. They were doing what they call a plugs out test, where the spacecraft is going to operate at the conditions where it was in outer space, on its own power and under pressure. And a combination of being under pressure and being a 100% oxygen environment, when a spark happened because of some faulty wiring, all of the Velcro that was in the space capsule burst into flames, and it was over in less than a minute in terms of the deaths of those astronauts.
That was one of the building blocks that led to them actually setting foot on the moon. Did you watch that?
What they did was, they could, because they realized the problems in the original Apollo capsule, and over the next 2 years, they made it better and effective. And can you imagine, because if that had happened in outer space, it would have been disastrous for the program.
Oh, that would have been bad. And what was it, 13 that had the explosion on the command capsule, and they worked their way through that? Yes,
they did. Apollo 13, and they call that a successful failure, and it's amazing that they came back. It is, and everybody worked for 3 or 4 days consecutively, no sleep, to try to get these astronauts back.
So getting back to the first landing on the moon, 51 years ago, and I think they're working to try to make this an official Moon Day.
Yeah, it should be. It's remarkable. You got to remember what we did with the technology of the 1960s, and the computer on board had less power than the phone that I'm using to talk to you right now, Jimmy.
That's incredible.
When they were going into the landing of the moon, they kept having the program alarm because the computer, the primitive computer, was getting overloaded. And luckily, they were able to realize it was just a program alarm, that the computer was just getting overloaded. They were able to override it, and they had a successful landing. Of course, when they were coming in, where they were landing was in the middle of a crater, and Neil Armstrong had to take over manual control to move beyond where the crater was. And they landed with only seconds worth of fuel left.
And he landed manually. Listen, I am out of time. I want to talk to you about this for the rest of the day, because you do know so much more than I ever would have anticipated. Professor Tim Robinson, the history buff and instructor at Salisbury University. Can you hang around a little bit? Because I'd like to talk to Lieutenant Tim Robinson with the Wicomico County Sheriff's Office, because you have a list of fugitives for us, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Well, stick around for